Hi, welcome to Sew Together Tuesday. I'm Teresa Coates and I'm the National Educator for Shannon Fabrics. And today we're continuing our series with Pat the Penguin, but today we're going to be working on his wings. So if you want to learn how, stick around. For this project, we're going to need the kit, the Pat the Penguin kit. It comes with all of the fabric, so you're going to be using some of the black and white, the Lapin fabric that's in here. You're going to need to cut 4 wings and 4 pieces of batting to go with the wings. So I have the batting ready, and then I have my wing ready to be traced and cut out. But let's go through the tools that we're going to use for this project today, because we've got our fabrics and we've got the batting. We're also going to need our 9014 stretch needles, our stiletto. We'll use a permanent ink pen, a felt tip pen, the Superior Threads polyester thread, clover pins, a bunch of bolts to use as pattern weights. I've also got my point turner that I'm going to use the other side, so any sort of a point turner that you have that has a curved end is what you'll want. I'm going to use my big Kai scissors today to do some cutting, as well as the Olfa blade that I love so much, and my little Fumori scissors too. So we're going to use a couple of different kinds of cutting techniques and make a really great project. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trace out the pattern. Okay, so I've got the bolts out on here to kind of hold it down in different areas. If you've got just regular pattern weights, that's totally doable too. And then I'm going to just trace around this. You'll notice on this fabric that there are parts that are lighter and darker, and I would recommend that you use that to your advantage. So on the parts that are lighter on the back, use those to do these small tracings. And the larger pieces, like the body, you'll use the darker areas so that you don't have to see the lines quite so much, because here you don't want to fight it. You need to be able to see these black lines that you're making. So I'm gonna check that, make sure I can see everything. Looks like it. Take those off. And now I've got my wing all traced out with my black pen. Okay, so for this I'm going to use the Olfa cutter, which is one of my favorites, a snap-off blade, stainless steel cutter. And I'm just going to use this on the Luxe Cuddle because this has a very long nap that is very fine. And so when I cut this with scissors or a rotary cutter, it's really messy, but with the blade, it's a lot less messy. So we're just going to use that. I'm just going to run this right along the back of it. And all I'm trying to do is cut the backing and not all the front. And I just check it to make sure I'm cutting it the way that I want to. And I'm just gonna run it right down here. I just keep a little bit of tension on it so it'll cut. And I'm gonna come back up to the top, cut here, cut down this side. And this is just a straight line down the length of the fabric, which makes it really easy to cut. And then I'm gonna come around this bottom curve. So this one I need to take just nice and slow. Keep the pressure on it. Any of these areas, if it's too small and you're having trouble with the blade, you can just bring out your little scissors. Those little Fumori scissors that I have would be great for this too. I just like the blade because it leaves a little bit less mess. I just have to make sure it cuts through. I try not to push too hard, so I definitely have to go back and check. But you can see that it just kind of pops open when it's cut. And all of those fibers that would otherwise be floating around my sewing room are just still left on here. Now I can pull this all apart, and now I have very little mess. So I'm gonna give this a little shake, and then we're here. And that's all the mess we've got. It's hardly anything to deal with, which is great. So now we're going to take the wing and we're going to baste it and put it onto the batting. So what I want to do is get this on here so that I can stitch around it. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my fabric out. This is just a scrap piece of fabric that I've got that I'm going to put behind it. So when I spray baste, I'm not spraying all over my table. I'm going to put this here, and then I'm going to put that onto my batting. Spray baste it just a little bit. Now I can move it over here. Okay, I'm gonna move this out of the way, and I'm just gonna tap this down into place, or pat it into place. I'm gonna move it so it sits on there better. You can see it grabs onto it, but it definitely can move around, which is great. So you can adjust it and move it as necessary. I'm gonna give it a little pat, and you can see it's stuck to it. So I'm also gonna put a couple of pins on here just to make sure that it doesn't move when I'm sewing it, because it has some curves. It has a tendency to kind of loosen up a little bit sometimes from the basting when I'm doing all the turning and stuff. So I'm just gonna put a few pins so it doesn't shimmy on me too much. All right, and then we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and we're gonna zigzag all the way around it. So I'm gonna bring this back over to the sewing machine and get this underneath here. I'm gonna do a zigzag right along the edge, so I've got it set at a 5 and a 5 basically. little bit big right now, but that's fine. And I'm just gonna stitch all along this edge. So all I'm trying to do is hold these two together and they'll become one, and then we'll cut them out. So as I'm going along this edge, this one's really easy, and it's just gonna feed through here. I can see the edge really nicely, but you'll see when we come around the other side, it's gonna get a little crazier. You can see the fur is already kind of going over. All that nap is nice and long, but I'm just aiming for it to put that zigzag over it. So once I get down here, my cut edge is back over here, and the nap is falling over it. So I'm gonna make sure that I'm stopping at a place where I can turn, and I'm gonna grab that edge of the fabric. So I'm not gonna worry about all these little extra hairs that are hanging out over here. I'm trying to catch this edge right down here. So I'm gonna keep my little stilettos where I can see it. I keep my eye here and aim that for the middle. And even though I can't see the edge, it's close enough, it's fine. We're just basting it in place. It makes it a little bit easier to sew when we do this next step by doing this first. Get that out flat so I don't catch it underneath. Keep this going right along here. I'm kind of just using the stiletto to make sure that it's staying down, that the basting spray hasn't come loose at all. And I'm gonna get up here and I'm gonna rotate again. One more. And then I'm gonna come up this edge, and then we'll have stitched around the entire thing. All right, and then we're gonna take it back to the cutting table. So now, if I look at it from this side, I can sort of see where the edge is, but I like to actually cut it from this side. I can see my stitches, and I'm just gonna use my big scissors to whack all the way around this, and I just use that zigzag as my edge. If you clip the threads a little bit, it's fine. It's really just holding it down for now. It's not an important seam line, so we can be not super careful with it. And I'm just gonna cut right along these edges. I really like these scissors. These are my 7280 SE. They are micro serrated, so they really grab onto everything that I'm cutting and cut really nicely. All right, so we're gonna work our way around. Now I've got it all the way around. Now it's just this piece. So I've got another piece already made that's the other side. So now we can put these two together. So you're gonna have to cut them out. When you cut them, make sure that you're cutting two this way and two this way. So now we're gonna lay these together, and I'm going to match the corners like I always do, and then can go in between. Okay, so match these edges. And then down around this curve. It's a pretty easy project, and you're just gonna do the same thing like I said with both sides. And this is a great technique to use when you sew the cuddle onto the batting. It's a great one to use for things that have a lot of curves, because the cuddle likes to move because it's a knit fabric, and the batting keeps it nice and stable. I'm gonna work this around here. And because I've got the batting on it, it's not gonna move too much. So I'm just pinning perpendicular. And it also gives it a little bit of ease, because I can see in here I've got a little bit extra, and I'm just gonna pin that and ease it in when I get there. All right, and so we're gonna actually sew across here, around this curve, and back over here, and we're gonna leave this side open. All right, so let's go over to the machine. So we'll bring this over here. I'm gonna change my stitch back to a straight stitch, 3.5, and I'm gonna start along this little short edge, get my stiletto. I'm gonna back stitch so I can get back to that edge and go forward, and then we're gonna pivot up here. All right, and now we're just gonna go right along this little curved edge. I'm gonna make sure my edges are pretty even, just so I can make sure I'm catching them both. The nice thing about this stiletto is I can actually poke through all of it and keep really good control over what is happening here. So these curves are a little easier with this stiletto. And like you see, I just keep checking it, make sure I'm catching everything, getting some batting there, pull it around the foot. And go all the way around. Just make sure I'm keeping that fabric and the batting down. If you wiggle a little, it's fine. If your seam gets a little bit narrow here, that's okay too. It's pretty easy to do. Just make sure that you're catching everything. Okay, you'll be able to see that when we finish, because the stitch will show up really nicely on the batting on the other side. Okay. So we're gonna get over here. I'm gonna back stitch again. Just to secure it. Okay, and we'll take it out. Okay, so we're gonna bring it back over here, and now all we're gonna do is we're gonna trim these corners. So a lot of times, if you've watched any of our other videos, you know that I don't usually trim corners, but I will with this one because it has the batting on it, and the batting will make it so that it doesn't turn very nicely. The Cuddle will turn beautifully, but the batting will get a little thick and weird. So I'm just gonna trim one layer at a time and put some clips into this so that it will turn nicely, and then I'm gonna flip it over and do it from the other side, okay? So, I did one side, now I'll do this one. And I'm just gonna clip the two of them together. You can see they're not very big clips, but just enough that it's gonna turn and be nice and smooth. Okay. You can see when I did this, I clipped my zigzags right off, but it doesn't matter. Okay. It's the thing we like about Cuddle. It's easy to deal with. All right. So now that I've got all of these done, I've got this clipped, so now I should be able to turn this inside out. And I will push this around. So this is what you can use the round end of your corner turner for. I'm gonna come in here and push that out, make that run nice and smooth. If there's areas where you feel like it's being a little bit bunchy, you can go back in there and put some more clips in so that it doesn't do that. All right, so now we've got that pushed all the way out, nice round little edge, and then I'm just gonna clip this together along here. Because then we're gonna take this back one more time to the sewing machine and just base down that edge. When we put it into actually construct the pat, which we'll do down the road, we'll want this all together. So that's why we're gonna zigzag it and make sure that it stays as one. Okay, so I'm just gonna put some clips in here, push this out, make it stay where I want it to. So this one here, I'm gonna clip that corner because I see that's a lot of bulk right there that it's not gonna wanna fold in. So I'm just gonna take that off, push it out. I'm gonna cut that off too, so we don't need it. I'm gonna put some clips on here. And then we're just gonna go zigzag that down. All right, so I'm gonna come back, move my machine back to a zigzag. Nice big one, we're gonna stick this under here, and I'm just gonna catch this edge down. Do a little lock stitch, and we're just making this edge nice and flat, so when we sew it into the body, it's easy to deal with. And you can see the Wonder Clips are great for this one. It'll just hold it right in place. All the way along this edge. So make sure that when you sew that other side that you don't do this edge too. That's happened before. You don't want to sew this shut until now. Okay. Come all the way up. That last little bit into there, and then cut my threads. All right, now that I've got that sewn together, my wing is actually done, but I'm gonna do one more thing before I put it together, is that I'm gonna use my little stiletto and I'm gonna come in here and fluff up those edges. It's really gonna hide the seams, and you can see, especially on the curves, it really will kind of tuck into the seams. So I'm gonna come around this whole thing, I'm gonna fluff that out. I'll do it to both of them so that it's ready to go when I put it onto the body. And it's gonna hide all of those seams really, really beautifully. So sometimes you'll see it kind of fluffs up on its own and it doesn't need too much, and then other times it sticks down really into the seam. And you just coming right along with the stiletto, I just kind of scratch it up real lightly, bring all those fibers right back up, and then it hides all your seam. It's really beautiful. So I'm just gonna do that all the way up the side. And I do this one on all the projects that I'm using the Luxe Cuddle, and I have a seam because I want it to hide. I don't want to see all those stitches pulled down in there. All right, there we go. And now we're ready to put the arms onto the body. All right, so now we've got our wings done. They're ready to go onto the body. We're gonna go forward next week and we're gonna do the feet, and then we'll put the whole thing together. Thanks for joining us for Sew Together Tuesday. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, happy sewing.